Michael. Welcome to the WealthTech podcast. I am happy to have you on the show. We have a lot to talk about today. We have certainly an ever-evolving landscape in both the family office market as well as the changing media landscape, which I'd like to kind of get into both of those subjects. But Michael, would you mind kind of giving an introduction to yourself in Modus News?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the program. Sure. So the short version is I'm Michael Thrasher. I've been a longtime financial journalist. I most recently, and I'm based in New York City, and I most recently was working at Institutional Investor magazine. And then a year ago, started an independent media company. And what that really is this weekly newsletter that I send out to people that work at family offices. And that's it. That's Modus.
Why did you start Modus? Tell me a little bit about your founder's journey. What was the impetus to kind of go out on your own? And then, kind of taking a look at the past year of launching the newsletter and the independent news service. Like, what has surprised you the most?
Sure. So I'll start with some of the former there. A couple years ago, there were basically sort of like two things happening at the same time. I was working in Institutional Investor magazine, and I was just sort of thinking about. I had been there for a little while and thinking about what I was going to do next in my career. And the other thing happening simultaneously was, at least like anecdotally, I felt like I knew a growing number of people that were leaving either some institution, an endowment, foundation, pension system, or whatever, or an asset manager. Those were really like the organizations that I was covering with the magazine. I felt like I knew a growing list of people from those places that were going to work for a private investment office. And I really wasn't writing many stories or anything, but I was just curious because this was sort of like the last group of investors that I had not had any kind of like regular engagement with or had done much reporting on ever. And as I spoke to some of these folks, one of the things that I sort of kept hearing was that they felt like there was a disproportionate amount of journalism sort of like about them as a group of investors, but not really for them as a group of investors. And, or at least not terribly good journalism or terribly good journalism consistently. And so I just had like alarm going off in my head when I heard that after so many times of all groups to feel underserved. That felt like a really weird one, right? Like there's in 2025 there is like a newsletter, I mean, one narrowly focused for like every type of professional,
Right, like model train enthusiast or whatever, like any niche.
Oh yeah,
right?
There's probably like 5 different ones just for that, right? Like there's and so I I I felt like there was this good opportunity. The good thing about financial services is, you still have to think hard, but there's still good commercial opportunity to like sell ads against something, and or have some kind of subscription, and even at like a relatively small scale. And then I just also had like I had a very specific idea or sort of vision for how I thought that like can or needed to be done for all of these things for it to be successful. For all this to sort of happen, I thought all of this sort of, it needed to happen in concert is maybe like a good way to describe it. And so that's sort of how I came to the conclusion to leave and start an independent company. I intentionally bootstrapped the business. And it's thankfully gone really well since then.
Well, that's great. And it's obviously a great addition and service to the family office community. So what has kind of surprised you over the past year when you look back at you know, what you were thinking about and where you are now?
I guess actually, I think the best way to answer this question is that it feels like almost every adage about starting a business that you hear from entrepreneurs and founders or whatever, it feels like so many of those are actually true. for better or worse. There's a ton
Right.
of things that are like extremely, extremely fulfilling, and there's a ton of things that are really difficult, or that you just would not be able to consider unless you had actually done it previously. So there's been a lot of surprises. No like huge singular surprise or good or bad. I would sort of describe it as like every day to be, especially like solopreneuring. Like I've worked for either like with or for a startup many years ago during a hiatus from journalism. And that was a small group, but I was not the only one. Like solopreneuring is like the ultimate sort of uh, like death by a thousand cuts. Like none of these things that I'm doing are like
There's no IT.
visually.
There's no nothing, right? It's
Yes,
all
yeah,
you.
yeah, totally. And the business of sending a newsletter to people is like not terribly complex, or so you would think until you start doing it. And
Right.
none of these things that come with like running any kind of small business, oh, no matter what that is, or this business specifically, are it's I'm not doing anything that someone out there has not done before, and they are not individually terribly hard. But when you put all that together and then you realize, oh, I short of working 80 hours a week, you just have to sort of live with some things and pick and choose your battles and like do the best that you can, and also like remind yourself that you're in it like for the long haul. It doesn't really do much good to like check things off the list this week if it's gonna like make me exhausted and unenthusiastic about it next week.
Talk to me about the role of independent media. I think we've seen that really kind of the media landscape shift a lot. I think you've certainly have seen a lot of, a lot of mainstream media is the right word for it, but certainly a lot of news people that have shifted off of being part of network news and got independent, or have started their own podcast. Certainly, podcasting is become a big outlet for a lot of firms. But how has the media landscape shifted over the past few years, and why is it so important to have independent media, even in the family office space?
Uh, I feel this is could be like a podcast series in itself, but like the really succinct, probably too general answer is that the media generally has faced like two massive headwinds. One, where people are choosing to spend their ad dollars has changed dramatically over the last 2 decades. And so, even though the number of ad dollars has continued to just go up and up and up, uh, it, the portion of that pie going to legacy media companies, whether it be broadcast networks, newspapers, whatever, that portion of the pie is getting smaller. Now, there's another huge headwind as well, which is, uh, and these two are actually very connected, or I guess sort of arguably one of the same, is that people are only have so many waking hours of the day. Only so much of that can be dedicated to something informational, entertainment, or whatever in front of the screen. And people are increasingly choosing other things that are far more engaging, all kinds of stuff across all kinds of platforms.
Yeah.
So, so news has like kind of been hit with a double whammy, which is like, like not more resources, if anything less for many organizations. And they had this like totally new, these like constantly emerging, growing and increasingly better like competitors for attention. So I think it's a big mistake actually for a lot of media companies to sort of talk about like their short list of competitors or like writing about the same things. You actually are. I think that's important. Like I obviously, like every media person, does this, but I think it's really important to sort of zoom out and think about just like how what is it that you're doing and like how well is that competing with just like someone's attention in general. So those are like
Yeah, the attention economy, right? Like you're competing against
exactly.
ad videos, really.
Exactly, exactly. So that's like at a high level some of the shifts. So it doesn't really matter whether you're writing about like family offices, you do a newsletter, you do a podcast. Like all of this is all competing in that attention sphere, right? Okay, so like why is I'll talk about like family offices and Modus and like independent media and why that's important. There's a ton of great resources for family offices, right? That have been around for a long time. And this stuff comes from all kinds of places, like banks, asset managers. There's membership organizations, there's independent research organizations, there's journalists. There's a lot of stuff.
Great surveys come out every year by some of the major institutions, right?
Yeah,
certainly got some great membership
exactly.
organizations and peer organizations.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't really think of a lot of those folks as competitors, actually, because what they're doing is valuable, but they aren't going to be able to go places and do things that independent journalism can and should do. Right. And I think that's part of the reason why Modus has been successful is that I'm, not just coincidentally, but I'm like looking for things that are timely, relevant, and that I know people who work at offices are interested in that other organizations, either because they won't, because of the type of organization that they are, the type of work that they're doing, or they can't because they don't have the resources. And so being independent is really important because that's really what enables you to do that type of journalism. And that's ultimately, if you are a news organization, which is the only business that Modus is in, and that's something I should have maybe explained earlier, I only generate revenue from ads in the newsletter. I don't take fees from recruiters. I don't do capital introduction. I don't consult for asset managers or anybody else or for offices. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I have like advertisement is like clearly marked in the newsletter.
Yeah.
And that like also gives me that freedom. There's a lot of like great business reasons also to like bootstrap a company and and I could talk a lot about the importance of like ownership, an independence in terms of ownership of a title and publication, and capital structure and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of like the actual work, that is also like really important to keep in mind and was really in some ways the kind of North Star for basically every decision that I've made about the company.
Well, it's an important role that you fill in. I've been enjoying the content. Is certainly. Tell me a little bit about the bigger picture and the bigger trends that you're seeing in the market.
This is like a good time to segue to that since we were talking about a set. Like another reason I'm really interested in those venture backed upstarts is that they are, I and you and I think actually have talked a little briefly about this or corresponded about it. The number of offices has obviously grown pretty significantly in recent years, and that's expected to continue. And with that little bit more scale, there's that many more companies and people interested in tapping this market in some capacity or another. Now, there's obviously been like many companies that have been around and doing this, working with offices in some capacity for a long time. So and because especially when you're talking about technology, this stuff can change pretty quickly. And AI has certainly poured fuel on that fire. AI has definitely not like slowed adoption or changes. That's that's for sure. So I'm, at a high level, I don't know if this is a great way to describe it. I'm sort of like road testing this idea with people as I talk about
it. The take lab with us.
Yeah. So with a lot of salt on this, I sort of visually think about it like this: like offices are trying to get to this destination of improved efficiency, and like most of the stuff that they're doing is not like this is the how offices are operating and the breadth of things that they're responsible for. Generally, like that's not really changing much. They're just trying to be more efficient and get better. And because they're getting bigger and wealthier, and because especially depending on the investing that they're doing, like this job is only getting harder and more complex. And so there is that incentive, even though it's not some like commercial endeavor. This is like effectively a cost center for a family in most or all cases, pretty arguably. There's still this impulse, and there is still some kind of pull to get to this, like I said, this sort of destination, more efficiency. And I think that there are legacy service providers that are trying to like and as well as these upstarts that are trying to sort of get to that destination, meet them at that destination first, or be waiting there for them. Obviously, many of them are like existing customers, so this is like an imperfect way to think about it. But it is a little bit, at least like journalistically, how I think about and frame stories. There's like two very different groups that are, at a high level communicating that they do the same thing for this customer. And this customer wants better service. So whoever's going to be able to deliver that better service before the other is going to have an advantage as business. And I think Aqualine purchasing Archway is like a really fascinating part. I think if there were like no GPs coming into the space and investing or acquiring some of those legacy businesses, it would be tempting to just sort of look at the upstarts and be like, oh, the tech debt and everything else is going to lose out. And in 5 years, everybody's going to be on one of these, or they're going to still be stuck in Excel and QuickBooks or whatever. But like, there's obvious, that's not the reality. Obviously, there's like a ton of those businesses are quite good at what they've done. They've been doing it a long time. There's at least enough opportunity for improvement and growth that one of them has been acquired, and I wouldn't be like shocked if there's more activity on that side. Like they will need capital to materially change a lot of them, I suspect. So at a high level, like there's like never, I always say that Modus, it primarily covers two things. I write about investment management at the offices, not markets and macro stuff. And I'm not trying to break news on any individual deal or like report about a deal that's done. I don't really know what a reader is going to do with that. Like that opportunity has come and gone. So beyond a curiosity, I've got other ways that like as a solopreneur, I can spend my time. But there's a very like meaty middle there about like how they think about their portfolios at a high level, and then how they're like broaching certain asset classes and why. And then the other sort of half of my time, more time than I even expected, is really reporting on the software and service providers that the offices are reliant on. Because there's basically like an utter void of that independent reporting about those companies. And in every other industry, there's journalism. This is like one of the main pillars of like accountability journalism, is like for the reader reporting on companies that they are reliant on and informing their decision making about them. So I'm very interested in all of that going on, everything going on in tech and services, like at the highest level. Like I was sort of poorly communicating maybe like in that visualization, but also all the way down
the family office tech map. I like that, the family office tech map, and it continues to evolve. But yeah, I think
the tech map is a great example, I think, actually, of sort of a different imperfect visualization. These are just companies that I know are pretty active in the space. They work with a lot of offices, and that's for anyone who's listening but like not familiar with the map. This is just a list of, I don't know, maybe 35 or 40 some odd companies that are in these categories. For anybody in the space, I don't think there's anything about that map that would like surprise anyone. And I should also add, like the map is just purely a journalistic construct. This was something I was actually sort of already doing for myself. And and then I just was like, oh, I might as well like put this up there, because it might be, I get questions about this occasionally from people, and this is just a thing that they can reference. Nobody pays to be on that map. There's no, that's just purely my own thing. And
yeah, you like it. I do think your take there is a good one. I look at the family office market. You can kind of break it into two components, right? The multifamily office market, which is commercial and profit motivated, RAA based, offering family office services, but to a higher end client. And then, we can get into, there's a whole nother discussion about how that term gets used and abused, but there are certainly legitimate multifamily offices out there that are profit centers. And then you look at the single family office, cost center, to your point, but they've always been trying to do more with less. So maybe on the multifamily office side, you call it scalability because it's a profit motivated. You try to scale the business, and the business is growing as you're adding on more clients. But family office side has been kind of a single family office side been similar in that they've always run really lean. And they handle a tremendous amount of complexity, and they're trying to do more with less. And the technology, like you said, is those platforms are trying to provide a state for those clients where they can do more for less. That especially I think you're seeing with AI and just technology and workflows in general, kind of really reducing that first mile, low value data aggregation. It used to be, tons of people were rekeying a lot of information into a lot of different spreadsheets and systems. Now you're seeing these systems talk to each other. You're seeing that kind of data aggregation capability, especially on alternatives. There are point solutions that are available to these family offices that are allowing them to do more with less. So I think it's a good take, and I think that's where you're seeing a lot of activity. And that certainly the family office, as the number of family offices explode, it becomes a more attractive investment opportunity. But it was interesting at the FO Tech Hub conference, they had a panel with a number of investors on there, motive partners, which was part of a set of seed round funding. They were talking about that they're still interested in these vertical markets, not necessarily looking at broad-based horizontal markets and try to find solutions for that. These broader ERP systems can be an example of that, but really looking at firms and founders that are trying to build solutions for specific niches, specific verticals, and getting deep on those. So, and there's plenty of room to play. These institutional providers that have been out there for a long time, like Archway, have a ton of institutional knowledge. And then also you're seeing that these new tech providers are coming in on that kind of second mover advantage, at least from a technology standpoint. So like I say, it's the golden age of family office technology. I will say that the good news is that family offices have more options than ever. The bad news is family offices have more options than ever, and creating a little bit of buyer's confusion. So that's why I think your newsletter is helping with that, to try to provide that kind of these storylines. What has been one of the more underrated stories that has kind of been out in the market that you've been thinking about?
I think that the AI story is like a bit overblown.
Most underrated.
Yeah, like so I think like the underrated is like all the other stuff because AI has like sucked up so much of the oxygen. Most offices, most the typical office is like probably like a couple 100 million in assets, maybe I don't know, give or take. And it might have 10 people. Like a lot of them have fewer, right? And
Yeah.
so like so many of the problems that offices have are like really not actually super unique to like a family office. Like these are just small business problems generally. It's just like, it's like you've got something pretty successful, you've got some resources, you've got some people, but you don't have an unlimited amount of these things. In fact, in some cases, like pretty limited. Like there's only so many people, there's only so many hours in the day. And they also sort of like by definition, then a lot of them have to be generalists or they're wearing more than one hat. So, and they are typically not great technologists, right? You think about all these folks. And so, like, I mean, I even in like pretty like tech savvy organizations, like, friends of mine or former colleagues, people that work in at software companies, all kinds of other businesses. Like we've even talked about this, like what kind of AI are you using? And I'm like, I'm using, whatever is already within the software and systems that I'm using because it's easy and I don't want to add another thing because especially for the offices, okay, great, better reporting about our alts or document, ways to manage this or that or to visual, there's so many other things you could, if you wanted like a specific thing for every single task, you'd have like a tech stack of like 40 odd, a list of 40 odd things. And they don't want to do that because like, who's going to manage that? Right. So I think the AI, like is it going to have an impact? Of course, because it's going to have an impact on all kinds of businesses and offices. But I think it's all like how much is going to change, especially in the immediate future, is most for grabs. There could be a huge impact, but I don't really know if it's necessarily going to like dramatically change like the people at the office or, how they're, I don't know. That's like very unknown, at least to me. So I think like some of the underrated stories are about like, a lot of this like like the performance reporting and better document management and like simultaneously much greater accessibility and huge universe of like products for alternative investments that's growing around family offices, not them specifically, but like they're part of a group of investors, private clients that all these firms are trying to attract. Okay, all of that's getting easier. Cool. Like I've been like often thinking and repeating like that line from Jurassic Park, which is like, we were so obsessed with like whether or not we could, like, did enough people, did we stop to ask like if we should? So I don't know. I feel like that's like an underexplored thing. Everybody's like really excited about all the changes and that's great. But there are also like potentially consequences. And when you're talking about illiquid investments, that those consequences might actually not be like super apparent in the foreseeable future.
It is an interest. I do think AI in some ways the hype's real. I mean, for one thing, it is changing every industry and every aspect of it. I think a lot of family offices are experiencing the benefits of AI because it's being incorporated into the fundamental platforms that they're currently using. It may not be kind of immediately prevalent, say data reconciliation, for example, the ability to apply AI to big data sets and to start to find anomalies quicker, faster, earlier is has been available for a while. I do think alternative investments, which progressed in 1996 and was stuck in a document, and it was really the amount of friction that was involved in that complete life cycle on the LP side was really arduous. You're seeing a lot of capabilities with AI being able to break that down in a successful way. That low value first mile capabilities being kind of cleaned up and nearly eliminated. And there's still need for the human in the loop, but the ability, instead of taking a look at 100 investment opportunities, they can look at 1,000 investment opportunities. And these smaller chunks would be so much better. I do worry. I think one of the things that I worry about with AI, there's a couple things. One is the more I look at the workforce and that entry level, 1 to 5 years, like part of the way people learn was by doing stuff and but doing stuff manually. And that all that manual work goes away. How do they learn? And then the other
Yeah.
thing is, I think from a society standpoint, like social media didn't really go great, and we're going to repeat it with AI. But that's another podcast for another person, I think. But that's
Yeah. There's a lot of unknown about the benefits in terms of investment management. So like, okay, AI has already, so many companies have like just in the last like couple of years, like pretty dramatically improved like the process of making these investments. Whether you're investing in companies directly across stages, whether you're investing in alternative funds or whatever. I don't totally know how much better the due diligence. How much better is it going to make due diligence, and also the like deal flow is a thing that like offices are constantly talking about. Like AI can't really like go out there and shake hands. It can't put you on the short list with
yeah.
the manager that you're really seeking for some reason or another. If it's accessible to you, it's probably accessible, or if it's accessible to me, it's probably accessible to you. Yeah, like if you're using AI, if you think, oh, okay, this is great, we're going to be able to do due diligence on or narrow our focus from 100 companies, early stage or Series A companies this year that we in a sector that we're familiar with and we're excited about or whatever. We're going to be able to do 1,000 this year. Like if you don't think every single GP is also using that tool or some better version of that, also plugged in with their own data and information, historical, if there's somebody that's been around a while, which you don't have in most cases as an office, right? There's just a lot of, I don't know. I have many more there. I personally think there are many more questions than there are answers about, like, is it going to have a big impact and is it, net going to be better? Yes. But like, I don't think it's a panacea for actually most of like the core problems, or challenges is maybe a better way to describe them. The headwinds of like being a really good private market investor.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that there's always going to be a need for a human in the loop, and if everybody has the same tools, how are you going to be different? I do think family offices have historically and continue to have mainly a data problem. They sit on a ton of data. They can't harness it because it's not necessarily accessible. It's in silos. It can be in different spreadsheets. You may even forget that you have some of that data. To be able to kind of have, if you can get good, clean, consolidated data, if these family offices can harness the mountains of data that they can sit on, they're certainly going to have better results, especially with this type of technology. But long term, I think there's still more questions than answers. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the family office business is a relationship business, and AI is not taking that away. And hopefully, AI takes away some of the manual tasks that gets in the way of being able to spend time in those relationships, whether it's ever developing a relationship with a GP or the family itself. Hopefully, it can free up more time for that. Let's talk about the future of family offices. Obviously, AI is a big component of it, but Michael, when you take a look 5 years out on the family office industry, what do you see?
There are certainly better authorities or other perspectives on this, but I'll give mine whatever it's worth. I mean, I believe what a lot of the reports seem to predict or estimate, that there's going to be many more offices in the future for no other reason than through markets up and down over the course of these cycles. At the end of it, at least like in the States, there are that many more wealthy people, and those people are getting wealthier. So there's going to continue to be people who are worth, whatever threshold you want to choose, 1, 2, 300 million, or, and certainly beyond. There'll be more of those people at that level of wealth that decide, for some reason or another, hiring some people to work only for me, dedicated to this task or these tasks, is worth it. So that's only going one direction.
Yeah.
Now and in the next 5 years, I don't really see anything that's gonna stop that. I don't think there's gonna be like fewer billionaires in 5 years.
Right.
You know,
The numbers definitely towards that. There are more ultra high net worth individuals and families out there. The numbers are expected to grow. I think the other thing that you're seeing is obviously the great wealth transfer, which we've been hearing about forever, but it is starting to happen, where there is going to be a younger generation that is going to be taking over these family offices, or really probably more likely starting their own family offices, as well as this increase in the total population that of individuals that can start a family office. I think you combine that with this kind of democratization of the family office capabilities via technology, that these new technology capabilities are coming out there, that previously to be able to support that, I don't know, $500 million family office was really tough. Now firms can do it, and it can do it in an economic way, and there's lots of providers to do it. So I think that kind of all those factors are going to come together, that it's really going to be the golden age for family offices, certainly a golden age for family office technology, that there is not only, I think, a democratization of family offices. We're going to see more of them because the ability to create your own, those barriers go away. I'm hoping that it's going to even happen on the greater wealth spectrum, that where you take a look at even on the RA side today, that they can really they only serve, or can only scalability wise serve the affluent. Can they start to come down scale and serve the mass affluent? Because if people have access to better investment advice earlier, they can have better outcomes. That I hope on
right?
both sides, that with the ultra high net worth individuals and families, that there are going to be more family office creations, because you can, and that's coming down. But also people in more of the mass affluent side will have a greater access to quality financial advice as well.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't really matter whether you're worth, $100,000, $1,000,000, $100,000,000, $1 billion. Like asset location, uh, asset allocation and location are like ultimately what makes hay. The rest is like short of anomalies and all kinds of other, less common or unique factors. Like the rest is sort of making a difference relatively on the margin. That's just like a fact. And so as software, I think actually you bring up a really good point. As like software and all kinds of other things get better, but also probably cheaper. There's a huge, like the aperture. I actually think about this periodically. There's
Most
and this is why I write about like the private banks and some and a short list. I haven't done much reporting about this in the newsletter, but I pay very close attention to some of those large independent private wealth management firms and others that really are there's a lot of people, I think you sort of alluded to this earlier. There's a lot of people that, threw multifamily office over the door, but aren't really like, but like their wealthiest client is like, worth like 10 million bucks. But on the flip side, there are a lot of those firms that actually do have families that are worth, in some cases,
sure.
way beyond that, like in excess of 100, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so, like the aperture gets shockingly wide when you go from like 150 to 100 million to 75 million to 50 million to 25 million. Like you're talking about an actually like pretty crazy number of people.
Your addressable
I'm talking about in the
market
States.
gets
The
expanded.
addressable market, yeah. If you're providing a set of services and it makes sense for you commercially to do it at these various levels, if you can do the same, provide the same quality, and you can figure out a way to do it
most
for the people that are worth, like 25 million and not 75 million or 100 million, you're going to probably have a good, if you haven't figured that out, cracked that nut already, you're probably going to have a very good business. Because there's just
a lot of people.
so many of those people. Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's like easy. There's obviously, this is hardly novel. I'm like the last person I feel like in financial services to state this opportunity. But
most
the whole reason I sort of started down this rabbit hole, a lot of those like family office specific software companies and service companies, like they also see that opportunity. So there's tons of people that have sort of been like, Betterment and all, the sort of self-directed investment platforms. They've always been sort of intrigued by how to grow their account sizes and fees and offer access to advisors and sort of move up market. And simultaneously, a lot of these like software and service providers really like focused on family offices. Like they are also thinking hard about like, well, wait a minute, like if we can do this for somebody worth 100 million bucks, how different actually, there's tons of people that are worth 50 or 75 million bucks that actually have more complexity and arguably like more needs than some others. Like the number is just the number. It's really about like people, right? And family office always talk about this. Like the number is just the number. Like it's really about like your needs and expectations and complexity. And then like, can you afford and do you have like the appetite to do it on your own? Maybe. And if not, then like, you find other ways to do it.
Yeah, it's a good point. I do think some of these family office service providers are kind of even on whether it be banking or technology, whatever, if you can tackle that kind of the hardest use case, then you can start taking a look at, hey, can I take a look at some of these other use cases where I've developed these skills, I have this muscle memory, I can do these capabilities, and then provide at a broader scale. And like you said, it gets exponentially bigger when you start moving those numbers down. All right, Michael, I love these rabbit holes. These are great. Listen, I like to end the podcast on a personal note with 3 questions that have nothing to do with wealth tech. Let's talk a little bit. Why'd you get into the news? Why'd you get into journalism? What do you love about it?
I got into journalism a little bit by accident. I grew up in a house where like the paper got delivered every day and like people made a coffee or a tea and sat and looked at like however much of the paper they could get through like before work or whatever. So that was like part of a routine that I guess I sort of took with me, I don't know, or started with me when I was younger. So I've always been like a big news reader, but I didn't decide to. I was always sort of interested in business and finance. I started as an economics major in college, and then I just like, I think a lot of people in college was like, okay, I'm doing this thing, but I don't have any, what am I going to do with this? And I don't really know. I didn't know anybody in those industries. I didn't really, then, I do actually remember thinking to myself, like periodically reading, like especially some kind of like long magazine article about a person or thing, and thinking to myself, like, I can't believe somebody got like paid to do this. And there's unfortunately like, the pay today, there's not many people that have that time and as journalists or given that time. There's not many publications. There's fewer doing that kind of work. But I was like, oh, that's really cool. So a friend actually suggested, they were like, well, if you're interested in business finance and you're like the biggest news reader that I know, maybe that's like maybe you should try to combine these things. So that's how we sort of started down the path.
You live in New York City. I love New York City, one of the great cities on the planet and in the US. What's your favorite spot in New York City?
And I don't actually make it there very often, but there's a cool there's a bar called Anay in Boerum Hill in Brooklyn. It's actually on the street that I live on, but you got to walk like 30 minutes, and it's cool because there's never a tourist in there, and a lot of people that take a book or something and hang out. And I don't know, it's a little. Yeah, and it's and it's I don't personally care like a ton about this, but the other thing that's kind of fun is like it is like a little bit sceney, like some of the celebrities and people that live in Boerum Hill or Brooklyn Heights like will pop in there and or around that area. So I don't know. It feels like a very New York experience when you're in there. Yeah.
There's 100 places like that. That's one of the great things about New York. Is there a book you've read recently you'd recommend?
The book I read most recently was When the Going Was Good, which is a memoir by Graydon Carter, who was the longtime Vanity Fair editor. And it's, if you're someone that likes to read magazines and you want a little bit of like the curtain,
The golden age of magazines.
yeah, the golden age of magazines. Like he's had a pretty interesting life. And he was there from like basically sort of the beginning through effectively, want to say, magazines are over, but that golden age of those types of publications, and he's obviously like quite a good writer. So you could blow through it like pretty quickly. Like if you were into that
if the writing's good, it makes it much more entertaining.
Yeah, like if you already had like some kind of interest in that kind of stuff, like I would say you should get it, and it won't take you too long and like too many glasses of wine like during the holidays. So you should go for it. And then if you're somebody that like I've started reading, and for somebody there's sort of a not really competing but a very complimentary book by a media reporter at the Times that is like, not memoir. This is like, a pretty robust, like 300 and some page thing about this golden era, and not just about Vanity Fair, but sort of like spans all the titles it kind of asked. And the Graydon card, the memoir is like, if you weren't a journalist, I would think before I recommended the other one. Recommend those.
Awesome. All right, Michael, we're going to do this again soon. This was fun. I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great. Hopefully it was, I certainly had fun. Hopefully it was interesting.